tell us something. And the name is designed to trick the audience into having a contract with the person on the stage. And it actually is a two-way conversation, even though the people in the audience are simply listening. I mean, it's active listening. And people say, I don't have a story to tell. My stories aren't interesting. I'm not important. And I don't believe that. I believe that storytelling goes beyond entertainment, and I can tell you that storytelling saves lives, and I'm not exaggerating. I had a woman, and she gave me permission to share this, who came up to me outside of the venue the night of the show. The show was sold out. And she said, do you have any extra tickets? And I was like, I don't. That's what sold out means. And she stuffed 2 envelopes in my hand. One had my name on it, and the other one had a former storyteller's name on it, Victoria Gannon. And I was like, okay, great, thanks. And I tucked them into my vest and went in, and I had to go on the stage and open the show and introduce everybody who was going to be performing. And I did that, and then I opened my letter. And I had to go on stage after reading it, and I was nearly sobbing, because what the letter said was, I heard Victoria's story last December, and I got home and wrote in my journal and cried on my kitchen floor until I fell asleep. And I woke up and had an emergency session with my therapist. I wanted to jerk the wheel every time I drove across the bridge and get into the river. Listening to her story saved me, and that's why I'm here. And what her story was, she was a Marine. She was in the United States Marine Corps. And she survived sexual assault by her fellow Marines. And that's what her story was about. And that individual is now an attorney who helps survivors. So, you talk about storytelling doesn't matter, personal storytelling isn't important. That is not true. And that's what I'm talking about. It goes way beyond entertainment. And when we're sitting in that room, sometimes people are telling hilarious stories that are simply entertainment. But everybody's got their own individual story, and you all in this room have your own individual story. That's important. And we'll talk today about story extraction. We're going to do some of that work and figure out, what story you might want to share. And there's going to be some sharing amongst each other. And if we have time and somebody wants to share to the group, we'll do that too. The first part of the, welcome, by the way.
Sorry,
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. We'll first introduce each other, ourselves, so I know who you are, and I'll try to use your names. There will be some writing that we'll do, and I'll do it with you. I never ask, I haven't passed anything out yet, but you're welcome to take something if you want. I never ask anybody to do something that I won't do. For example, I worked in a kitchen, and it was the first time I was ever in charge of anybody. And I looked around and I sort of got them situated and taught them how to run the dishwasher and sort silverware and all those kinds of things. And then I looked around and found the worst job I could think of that I could find, and that was to clean a hood, those grill hoods that had been sitting outside for 3 years. And it had like 2 inches of grease on it, and bird poop and rat poop, and it took me the entire 5-hour shift to clean it. And one of the minions came up and said to me, why didn't you have one of us do that? And I said, because I'll never ask you to do something that I won't do. I have been doing this kind of work for years, and I can see the bigger picture. And if I ask you to do something, it's not because I'm picking on you. It's because I can see things that you aren't paying attention to. So I will do the work tonight with you. And sometimes I'm surprised by what ends up coming out of me. So you might be surprised too. To sort of get us centered, we'll do a little reflection activity first, and then we'll do some brainstorming activities. Then we're going to do a little free write, and I'll give instructions on what that's like if you've never done it. Then we'll play a little game, that I like to call pilot co-pilot, and I'll tell you more about that when we get there. And that is designed to improve our active listening skills, as well as help us focus and figure out if the story that we're telling is the story that we're intending to tell is the story that we're actually telling, and are the parts of the story that we think we're telling that are important, are those landing for the listener? Or is the listener picking up something else that they think is important? And if that's true, is it because we're making mistakes? Or is it because the thing that they think is important is actually the real story that we're going to tell? So it's a pretty interesting exercise too. I'm Marc Moss. Good to meet you. And since you were late, you get to introduce yourself first. But also, the only other rule, there's a couple rules, I guess, in my class. If you volunteer someone else for something, you volunteered yourself. And whatever happens in this room is, besides the fact that we're being recorded, is confidential, and you should feel safe to say to each other whatever it is you need to say. So, all that being said, hi.
Anything you want me to say besides my name?
That's all.
Okay, Alice.
Yeah. Alice.
E-by. The last name is 3 letters. E, B as in Barbara, I.
Alice Ebi.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Alice.
I'm Kathy Laub.
Kathy Laub. Great.
I'm Brittany Euchre. I work here in town as an elementary school librarian,
Yay.
which I absolutely love. I write fiction and poetry, but I've just within the last year or so, started getting into writing some creative nonfiction and exploring some different parts of my own life and trying to tell those stories in a way that makes sense to everybody else but me.
Yeah, memoirs is a hard thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and writing a story is much different than telling it versus reading it even. So, Sarah, everyone knows you.
I work here at the library.
Yes.
Richard Baker.
Good to meet you, Richard. Yeah. And then photographers.
Yep, Jake Sarch. I also work here at the library, and I'm an author. I've written a couple of nonfiction books about Butte.
Are you going to participate, Jake?
Sure, I'll participate.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm into storytelling, so
Yeah,
why not?
excellent. Yeah, so if you don't have anything to write with or on, here's some.
I'll take a
Yeah,
pencil.
Do I need more than one?
Take 2 or 3.
Take as many as you want. Okay.
If you need more down the road, we can.
Yeah.
There's plenty to get.
Yes.
You got some? Jake?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll just leave that there.
And
And I don't have any stickers, but I do have, these are tickets from events that didn't sell. So there's a book sale upstairs, and if you need bookmarks.
Thanks for the plug.
I know what I'm doing. So we're going to do a brainstorming exercise. It's timed, so I'm going to get out my little stopwatch, or I guess timer. And they're a minute. Each prompt is a minute long. So I'm gonna. I'll do it too, like I said. And the first prompt is people in your life that are important to you. Now, I am a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, but I've never met the guy, so he can't make the list. People that are important to you, that you've spent time with, that you know, they don't even have to be alive, but they have to be people in your life. As many as you can think of in 1 minute. Go. All right. So people.
Fastest minute ever.
I know, right? Yeah. And some of these prompts, you'll be like, is the minute over yet? So the next one is places that are important to you. Now, my mom's family is from a place called Castel di Sangro in Italy, Castle of Blood. I've never been there, so I can't really put that on the list. It has to be places that are important to you that you've spent time in. And you can be as specific and granular as you can be. Like I was a park ranger in Yellowstone for 7 seasons. That's a big place, so if I put Yellowstone down, like that's But if I put Beckler Meadows down, that's going to be an even more specific potential story coming out of that. So places that are important to you, be as granular as you can be in 1 minute. Go. All right. People, places. The next one can become esoteric if you want it to be. Things that are important to you, and they can be real objects like your phone or your pen or your hiking boots, or it could be things like honesty and family and joy. So as many things that are important. Predictably, the next and last prompt is the last time. Now, it doesn't have to be the very last time. Like I said, I'm from Ohio, and the last time I saw my parents might be the last time my dad remembers who I am. He's got dementia. But it won't be the last time I see him. Right? But the last time, as many last time events as you can think of in a minute. So I'm going to set another minute timer, and what I'd like you to do, and you don't have to share any of this, but you can if you want when we get there, is go through the list and somehow identify, mark, underline, or circle around, put a rectangle around, things on the list that call to mind a story for you, or that maybe surprised you, things that made the list that you didn't expect. Go through that, all those lists that you made, and identify some of those entries in 1 minute. All right. I will share some of mine, and these could certainly turn into stories, some of them. People that made the list that I've got probably stories about: Joyce, Josie, Ziggy, Tracy, Kate Morris, Winter, Dave Phillips, Pat, Barbara, places: Beckler Meadows, the Courthouse, Old Post Pub, Charlie B's, Al's and Vic's, Dillard's, The Bridge, Blue Goose Saloon, Super 8, and Angel Falls, and my car that I wrecked, Molly. My craft watch is important to me. It still works. My gratitude practice, writing practice, the North Side neighborhood where I live, Waterworks Hill. The last time I saw my parents, the last time I lost a mouse, the last time I made art or lived alone, first time I kissed someone, first time I broke an ankle, first time I went to Burning Man, first time I got married, first time I got divorced, hopefully the last time. First time I wasn't scared of my father, and first time I got fired from a job. So, those are some of mine, and I'm sure some of you are going, I want to hear that story. About one of the things that I listed. Anybody else want to share?
Well, I'll start.
Okay, great.
Looking at the big picture of what I wrote, it's all about me.
Well, good.
Do you want to hear everything that I just wrote down? Or
You can just read some of them. You don't have to read them all. I mean, we do have a time limit.
Most important person was me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Important places were the Redwoods in California, Norway, Las Vegas, lived there all my life. Things. Sounds, if you don't know the whole story, it sounds vain, but jewelry. There's a story behind it.
I bet.
First time, four-wheeling, skiing, water, teaching, being a parent, being on my own. First time I lost a job. Last time I seen my ex. Last time I taught. Last time I graduated from anything. Hugging my mom and feeling small.
Anybody else want to share? Not required.
I'll go.
Okay.
I mean, trigger warnings for these things. I think we're all adults,
Yeah.
but just in case.
Yeah, thanks.
And this is just throughout all 5 prompts in the list. Josh in the past, Lewistown, the Blue House, having interest in me, showing you give a shit. First time I had sex, first time Josh asked for a divorce, first time holding my children after giving birth, last time I had sex with Josh, last time I was pregnant.
You're deep in it. Thanks.
It's all about Josh.
Yeah,
Yep.
kick him right in the shins. Anybody else?
I'll share a few.
Sure, I'll, just a few here. My grandpa Mike, library here, my grandparents' house, any stage with the mic or performance to be had, my music collection, first time I had a crush, first time I traveled out of Montana, last time I thought I cared for someone who wasn't related to me, last time I was in college, last time I came back to Montana. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some of it's, you gotta wonder how much you wanna tell.
Right, exactly. We don't have that too, yeah. I was, so at Tell Us Something, the way it works is I put out a theme and a call for storytellers. And the themes are usually really broad by design so that we can get a lot of different interpretations on the theme. Themes can be like, the first event was Dear Diary. We've had Getting Away with It, which is where that U.S. Marine Corps story happened. The First Time was a theme. Didn't See That Coming was one. Close to the Edge was the one we had in March. Is that right? No. Yeah. Coming up is Going Home in June. Never Again is in September, and Hold My Beer is going to be the one for December. So they're pretty broad. And so I put out the call, and people call a pitch line, and they have 3 minutes to give the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And we're going to talk here in a minute about story structure, but that's the basic essence of a story. It has to have those 3 things. And it's hard to do that in 3 minutes. But then that turns into an MP3 file that gets dropped into a Dropbox account, and we have a selection committee. Everybody listens to all the stories, and then we have a shared spreadsheet, and we all sort of vote. And I call everybody back and say, hey, you didn't make it this time. Or, hey, you made it. And one guy pitched 4 times for one event. He just really wants to get there. And so then we workshop the stories. I do it one-on-one with the individual, usually on the phone. But this particular individual, the reason I'm telling you this right now is because she's not a phone person, and she said, come over to my backyard. And we'll do it in the backyard over a glass of wine. And I was like, okay. So we did, and her story was, she's probably in her 60s, and it was about when she was in her 20s, and she was in love in Italy, and got left, and her heart was broken. It was like, we've heard the story. But it was fine. And she worked at NPR and was on the radio, and she knew her cadence was great and all that stuff. So then, after we're done, she's like, do you want another glass of wine? Come into the kitchen, I want to show you the house. So in we go, and it's like really fine craftsmanship. The house is just beautiful. And she's pointing out all these little details, and I'm going, who did the house? And she's like, oh, Jay did. Who's Jay? Oh, Jay's my husband now because we crossed the line when he was designing the house. I was like, oh, Jay's coming over. And so we ended up dating, and now we're married. And last summer, he almost died. How did that happen, Kathy? Well, he got stung by a bee in his truck, and he didn't have his EpiPen, and he passed out in a truck, and he ended up somehow he was able to park, but he really almost died. And he wouldn't have made it if it was for John. And I'm like, John? She's like, yeah, no, John Kimmel. I'm like, oh yeah, no, John Kimmel. She's like, but we can't, we're not going to say his name. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, this is the story, not the bullshit about Italy. And she was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. So, that was a tough story to tell in front of 800 people. And she was crying, and it was beautiful. So, story structure. Yes, we have beginning, middle, and end. But at the beginning, there's a couple things happening. We get the introduction, so sort of get the lay of the land and the setting and who's in the story. But then there's the the triggering moment. What is there to kick off all the action, the inciting incident? And then we have to raise the stakes. Like, why should I care about this? Why should I care if you're gonna get divorced from Josh or not? You know, why should I care about your jewelry? You know, raise the stakes until we get to the main event, which is like, you know, the roller coaster ride. You get to the top of the hill and here we go. And that is really the crux of the story, is the main event. And so sometimes people are like, I don't really know how to start this story. It's a big story. I mean, I hiked all over Switzerland. I'm like, pick the most exciting thing and work backwards. Figure out what the main event is and then work backwards. And then once you figure that out, that's going to help you decide what the ending looks like. And the other thing that will help you decide that is, what do you want your listener to come away with when you're finished telling the story? Do you want to change their mind about something? Do you want them to know you better? Do you want to just entertain them? What's your goal here? Sometimes there's a call to action at the end. And so, you know, that's why you should buy Hoover vacuum cleaners or go to the book sale upstairs, you know. But in my events, we don't allow calls to action, so there's no like political or religious anything allowed, or like selling of products. We had a guy who is a well-known individual in town, and he was telling a story, and at the end he like pitched his fundraiser, and we had words, and I cut that part out of the recording, and I told this story in town and used his name, and knowing that it would get back to him. And years later, he came up to me and said, you know, I'm really sorry that I did that. I was like, I know. But it was also scary, you know, to have this kind of an important person apologizing to me, which I was surprised about. So I don't use his name anymore. But no calls to action is sort of the rule. So we have, yeah.
Do you, beginning, middle, and end, does that include a plot? And
Yeah,
a
I mean, the whole, this
struggle and a
is the
resolution?
structure of the plot. So at the beginning, we get the characters and the setting.
Characterization.
Then we have the triggering incident, the inciting incident, and then raising the stakes with the main event. And then we have the resolution. So that is the story arc where the plot fits together. Yeah. And I have a little worksheet for folks if you want to take one with you that helps you organize your thoughts in bullet points in that structure. So they're on the table, and you can grab one on your way out if you want one. But story extraction, going back to that, the next exercise we're going to do is a free write. And I'm just going to read the instructions to you because it's easier. I won't mess it up. And you can have one of these too if you want on the way out. It's the instructions for a free write. It's a technique for finding one's own voice and ability to put ideas on paper. And it's timed. We're going to do 10 minutes, which is a long time. And I'll give you a choice of 3 different prompts. And if you don't like any of those, you can write on whatever topic you want. So when you're writing during that 10 minutes, don't stop to think about structure of your sentence or grammar or spelling or anything. No, like, you're the only one going to see this. So just don't take your hand off the page. Just keep writing. And don't judge what's coming out. You might be surprised at what comes out. And I will read later for you, after we finish the exercise, what ended up becoming a poem based on a free write. And it's totally unedited. And it shocked me what came out. But I had been doing free writing in a workshop class for 12 weeks. I signed up for a writing workshop class to observe, to see how online workshops work during the pandemic, because I thought maybe I didn't have any revenue coming in, so I might have to do something like that, but I don't know how to do that. So I signed up for this class. You can't be an observer in a writing class. It's not possible. But that's where I really embraced the free writing activity. So, tell me about a time where you got caught. That's one prompt. Tell me about a time where you were right. Or tell me about a time where you were unprepared. You got caught, you were right, or you were unprepared. I'm going to set a 10-minute timer, and I'll do it too. Before we start, are there any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Okay. So, for 10 minutes, whatever prompt you've selected, or if you have something that's not one of those and that you want to write on, go for it. 10 minutes begins now. Wow, went faster than I thought we were going. So then the next piece of this exercise is we're going to set a timer for 2 minutes. Read through what you've written, and same as before, circle, underline, make a box around words or phrases, not entire sentences and not the whole thing. Words, phrases that jump out at you or surprise you, and we'll have an opportunity to share some of those things that you identify. All right. So here's what I identified. Designated campsite, Nancy and I, tired. Ever hiked that far, Union Falls, Yellowstone. First time backpacked. Cans of tuna, required a can opener. Bare hair all over the place, show me. Pointed up in the trees, Spanish moss. Green attached to it. Pork and beans, tuna, P38. Anybody else want to give it a whirl?
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of wrote the rules and underlined like whole sentences. Oh. Both relieved and terrified to answer. Most chaotic random moment imaginable. Flying had become so easy that I didn't have to think about it. It just rolled off my tongue. Deep down I knew I was fucked. In that Was it worth it? Was the drink and the connection and the kiss across the table at the wine bar and the mystery of a new house and a new bed and a new body worth it? I reached out for a light post to steady myself, held it together, wouldn't let tears spill in the same way.
I hear you. I'll share. I was prepared for feeling nothing, of being alone, even though with someone. I was not prepared for handling finances on my own, feeling strong or unafraid. I was not prepared for knowing I didn't know me. I was not prepared for flashbacks of hurtful phrases. There were 51 that I wrote down. I was not prepared to count my friends or family for support. I was not prepared for cooking alone. I was not prepared for listening to my own thoughts. I was not prepared for waking up for myself, or my consequences and my choices that it made on others. I was not prepared to hear myself sing out loud. It made me cry. I was not prepared for the joy of smiling before I fell asleep at night.
So I told you I would read you one that I did, the whole thing. It's pretty wild. I have to look it up. This is, like I said, a result of the workshop that I did, and this is unedited. The prompt was my father's hands. My father's hands are big and strong and sure. They are confident and fast. And they know. They know how to wipe away tears after a lost baseball game. They know how to apply Bactine and mercurochrome before applying the Band-Aid. My father's hands know how to find the wrench on the ground behind his head while he lies under the old Fiat, changing the oil. My father's hands can fix anything. My father's hands are patient as they throw the baseball over and over into my waiting baseball glove in the soft light of an Indian summer evening. My father's hands are patient as they fold worms squirming onto the barbed hook, careful not to catch on the danger. My father's hands are patient as they untangle the fishing line in the dark on the dock after my brother abandoned his pole to make mud pies on the shore, and I hope I don't catch anything while my father's busy hands are untying the failures of a little boy. My father's hands are busy grabbing my shirt as I run from their power. My father's hands miss for once as I duck under their swing and wriggle free from their grasp and run shirtless out of the house into the hot August sun. My father's hands bunch into fists, tearing at my shirt. My father's hands rest, wrinkled on the table. He told me once, there will come a time when you can whoop your old man. And my father's hands, spotted with age and time, sit powerless. And I know today is that day where my father's hands cannot tighten the handcuffs on a prisoner, pull another trigger, or even clench into fists tight enough to do anything but wipe away his own frustrated tears. My father's hands, swollen, ring tight on his diabetic finger. My father's hands reaching out for help. My father's hands shaking as they raise the gin to his lips and then sit quiet on his lap when he places the glass triumphantly, without spilling it all, onto the waiting table. So it's a powerful exercise, the free writing. And it's useful in getting stories out of us. And you know, that story I haven't told it all the way yet. And someday I will. Hopefully not at the funeral. That's not, the family doesn't want to hear it. Which brings us to responsibility. Storytellers, as storytellers, we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our listeners, and to the characters in the story. We have, I call it safety third. And the third person that you have to keep safe is the character in the story. The first person you have to keep safe is yourself. So if you're going to tell a big story, you have to have enough time between, if it's traumatic like that, you have to have enough time between the event and now to have healed. So I say, speak from your scars, not your wounds. So if it's still raw, you're not ready to tell that story. You got to keep yourself safe. And then you have to keep your audience safe. I had a woman who was a heroin addict, and she recovered. And she was telling the story of her recovery. And she had dealt with all of it. She'd been through the therapy, she'd done the work, she's fine. And she's describing the opening sequence of her story as she's describing a suicide attempt that happened in the bathtub with sharp objects. And she was very, very graphic about it. And she was just ripping through it, and it was fine, with her. And I was like, no, man, you can't do that. The audience, there's going to be somebody in the audience who either has experienced that, wants to experience that, or has a family member or a friend who died that way, and you can't do that. And so what we did instead was talk about the color of the water and got the point across. And that was, kept the audience safe. And I used to believe trigger warnings are bullshit. No, life doesn't come with trigger warnings. But when we're in a performance setting, people didn't sign up to be traumatized or brutalized by the storyteller. And so if there's something big like that happening, I always say, sensitive listeners, be aware that these things might be coming up, and please take care of yourself. I had a storyteller in March of, is that right? March of this year, No, it was December of last year. Told a story about a rape that she had endured. And I was telling my therapist about it beforehand. I was like, this has never happened. I'm not sure how to handle it. And my therapist was like, how about if I show up? And I'm like, I'll be the professional help. I was like, well, are you going to bill me? And she's like, no. That's a big story, and you need somebody on site for that. And the trigger warning that you generally give before the story, you need to do that well ahead of the time she walks out on the stage. So I did it 2 storytellers ahead and said, this is coming. It's pretty graphic, but not like Quentin Tarantino level graphic. And there is professional help available to you if you need it, and identified where the help was located. And had an individual utilize that help. And now that individual is using the same therapist I am. We see each other in the waiting room. But yeah, so if you are going to tell a big story, first you have to be sure to keep yourself safe, and the audience member, the listeners, safe, and then the people in the story. So I didn't, you noticed my dad, I did not paint him as a monster. I could easily have done that and used that as an opportunity to get revenge on him. And this is no place for that. Storytelling is not a place to, talk about how badly your boss treated you and, sort of publicly shame him or whatever it is you want to do. That's not okay. I've seen people do it, and it's cringy for everybody in the room. They're all just going, oh my God. And then I've also had, I had a woman who, we used to do this show in a bar. And it was a dive bar, and it was pretty wild. They have 300 people in a dive bar, quiet, listening to storytellers. And she, when her dad died, she inherited the bar from him and owned it. And then she sold it, and this was the last time she was going to be in the bar before it was remodeled. And she got really drunk and weeped on the stage, about her dad for 20 minutes, and everyone's looking at me like, are you going to pull her off the stage? And I was like, I can't. She's got to get through this. And it sucks for everyone, and we were all just going, oh no. So, you know, scars, not wounds. And later she was like, did you record that? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, don't publish that. I'm like, don't worry. You know. So those are the safety rules and the responsibilities that we have as storytellers. You know, if you ever decide you want to do a performance.
Question.
Yeah.
You ever seen where, so you talk about giving it enough time,
Yeah.
where just the process of bringing it up can bring back more trauma?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, when I wrote that,
Yeah.
it took me 2 years to be able to read it out loud without crying. So yeah, it was, I mean, not performance, not performance worthy. That's my wife. She's the only one that gets through the do not disturb. Got derailed. Yeah, so no, when I wrote it, I didn't ever think it would be published, first of all, which it got published. And I didn't think I would ever perform it. But when I was reading it to just friends, I couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
And it was just last year that I was able to, I actually did perform it, which was wild. You know, I was in a little sort of speakeasy style bar and alone. And it was open mic night, which I didn't know when I walked in. And the piano player was like trying to figure out what she was going to do next. I'm looking at her phone for a cover song, and she was doing like Britney Spears songs, but like slow, sad on the piano, sort of jazzy. And I had a couple scotches, and I walked up and I was like, hey, can I sit in with you? And she's like, are you a singer? And I was like, no. She'd never seen me before. I don't know who she is. She said, what do you want me to do? I said, that. Whatever you were just doing, just do that. And I performed it and made it through, and it felt amazing. It was cool. And if I hadn't had the scotch, I probably never would. But yeah, safety rules, responsibilities. So next activity was taught to me by a child. I was giving a storytelling summer camp, and Sheila and Mary had been paired up, and they had been working together all week on their stories that they were going to perform that night for the parents. And we were going to sort of do a dry run, a little practice session. And Mary was not having it. You know, she was just not going to do it. And I'm going to mess up the names because I'm not using their real names. But she wouldn't do it. And so I was like, Sally, can you tell Mary's story for her? And Sally was like, sure, if Mary tells my story, because she knows it just as well as I do. And I was like, that sounds great, but let's give it a whirl. And so she got up on the microphone and was going through with the story, and Mary kept going, no, that's not right. And she goes, I'm just going to tell it. And like she got up and did it, right? So I tricked her. But I was like telling a friend of mine who's a theater person and does theater summer camps for kids, and she was like, oh, we do that all the time. We call that pilot co-pilot. And so what happens when we do that activity in a formal setting like this is we get into pairs, and we have enough people to do that, where I don't have to be one of the pairs. And I set a timer for 3 minutes. And one person is the pilot. The pilot is the storyteller. The co-pilot is the listener. The co-pilot's job is only to listen. Do not interrupt. Do not ask questions. Do not write anything down. Your job is to listen, knowing that you're going to then become the pilot and tell that exact same story back to the original storyteller in the first person, trying to match the cadence, use the same language, don't omit anything, and don't add anything. That's the exercise. The story can be one that you've stumbled upon this evening, if you want it to be. It can be one that you've told before that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be long or big. We only actually have 3 minutes to do it. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about that while we all take a restroom break. And when we come, we're going to take 5 minutes for that. And when we come back, we'll get into pairs, determine who's going to be the pilot, who's going to be the co-pilot. And I'll set a 3-minute timer and we'll see what happens. Okay, 5 minutes.
Bathrooms are around the corner, in the hallway.
Thank you.
If nobody knew that. Right?
Yeah, not on the computer. That's kind of cool. No, I heard about the remodel, some people are super against.
Oh, I'm all for
I am too.
I'm
Have you been to the Missoula Library?
Oh, yeah. I used to live in Missoula.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I moved, it was like right before they opened the new one.
Okay.
Distinct memories of the old
Yes.
one. And it makes me a little sad that it's not there anymore. But also like so happy.
It's so cool.
Got that amazing.
It's amazing, yeah. Yeah, so do you know Britt Buchanan? She lives there. She lives here now.
So,
Yeah, she works for the, Blue Rock Prison.
oh, okay. No, I don't know.
Yeah, she works for a year ago.
Oh,
Like, hey, we're gonna be in your town tonight. She's like, I'm not.
nice.
Yeah.
There's no blank sheets left, are there?
There-
There's some more paper here.
Oh, yeah, I would like some.
Oh, yep, here you go. I'm hoarding it all. It's a dollar page.
Well, what time is it? I need it. I can't get my phone to turn off.
You look kind of familiar. Did you ever play musical instruments at the KOA?
Yeah, still do.
Do you still do that? I thought I
Every summer,
recognized you.
every summer.
You have an awesome memory of songs and lyrics and history of them. The man does.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah, he does a good job.
You really do. I was impressed.
Yeah, we play there every summer, every night.
Uh-huh. Very good.
We start next weekend.
Oh, do you? Very good.
And they're real good about letting people come in and listen to us, you know,
Mhm.
who aren't registered there. You know.
Yeah.
So if you want to come in, we're 8 to 10 every night. They like you to park outside the main gate
Yes.
if you're not registered there.
Yeah.
And
Like
then
we're
just
all back.
walk in.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I loved it, and I have referred it to my friends.
Well, come back sometime this
I will, I
summer
will take a friend.
if you want, yeah.
All right. So it looks like we're sort of already in pairs, you and Sarah can get together. And there's plenty of room to spread out, so it would get kind of loud in here if we all were in here doing this. So if some people want to go out into the hallway, there's, you know, on the opposite side of the hall. You can bring chairs if you want or sit on the floor. But I'll set a 3-minute timer. I'll do 3 minutes and 30 seconds to give you time to figure out who's going to be the pilot. And then after the 3 minutes is expended, I'll call time and you then will switch. And if you get finished early, that's fine, you know, just come back into the room. But try and be as precise as you can be if you're the co-pilot. The pilot's job is the easiest one, so if you're scared to be a listener, choose the pilot.
Wait, one person tells the story to the partner,
That's correct.
and then the partner, after 3.5 minutes, tells it back to him?
Yes, in the first person.
Don't you mean, isn't that within the 3 minutes?
No, so the first storyteller has 3 minutes
Oh,
to
okay.
tell a story, which is hard to do in 3 minutes, but you
Yeah.
know, you'll get something.
Yeah.
And then
Oh, okay.
after that,
That's more reasonable.
Yeah,
I was
so
thinking
Alice,
the
so
whole
like-
thing was in 3 minutes.
yeah, gosh, no, that's insane. Yeah, so Alice, you maybe you're the pilot, and you tell the story to her. Is it Jane?
Kathy.
Kathy listens. After 3 minutes has expounded, what is the word I'm looking for?
Ended.
Thank you.
Somebody's.
Ended works.
Way easy. After 3 minutes is ended, Kathy becomes Alice and tells the exact same story in the first person back to you. Okay? Is that more clear? Okay, cool. So go ahead, figure out where you're going to be. I'm going to, like I said, set a 3.5 minute timer. And once you guys get sort of settled in,
That's fair, that's fair, yeah.
Are you staying here,
Huh?
or can we stay here?
Can we all stay here?
yeah, that's probably enough.
Yeah,
Just,
I'm
yeah,
good.
you guys should be able to.
I
able to do that.
just can't sit on the floor.
Okay, so
Yeah.
either, yeah.
Do you want light back there?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, well, whatever you want to say, you know.
Are you going first?
Yeah, are you supposed to,
I'll set the, I'll start the timer. Go
are you
ahead.
supposed to hear something?
Oh, it does, I don't need to. So,
Okay, it's been 40 long years since I started hearing everybody say, do you know who you look just like? You look just like David Letterman. My, I'd say, who's David Letterman? I didn't have a TV, I never watched TV, I still.
Sled dogs are famous for.
Oh, he's a late show,
You're watching
a
them.
late night show host. I said, I never heard that. And this went on for years. Finally, somebody took me into their apartment and turned on the TV, and
I took her
to show me
home
who David
and
Letterman
down
was.
a few blocks, there was
He struck me as being rude and arrogant, but I decided I didn't like it.
just a park.
So from this went on for 9 years. Every time I meet somebody who would say, has anybody ever told you?
And then
Nobody who ever knew me ever said,
feel as best as you can, as we go.
met me as strangers.
And then,
Well, finally,
there,
one night in
still up
1993, my ex-wife and I were playing
But I let her
KOA, like
wander
we've played
around.
for 35 years.
sniff the trees.
In blows this man from this
Do her
tourist
own
from
thing.
New York,
Um,
traveling in a Winnebago
And so
with his
this
wife and
particular
my
day
daughter. Says, you know, who you look just like? I says, no, I'm not as ugly as that son of a bitch.
It
I'm
was
not."
in the fall,
He
but
says,
the
yeah, I know, it's eerie how much.
no snow on the ground.
He just looked just like.
But, so
He
the.
says, I'm a CBS news
was
writer.
Coming.
None of us coming over to CBS, and by golly, I know some of these writers, and they'd love to get a hold of you. I says, no.
It
I
wasn't
ain't
dark
that
yet,
son of a
but it
bitch.
was, it was heading down.
My ex-wife, who I played with,
So we had
says, oh,
wound our way around.
here, take my phone number,
most of this
contact me.
big,
Don't listen to me,
wonderful block size
I'll get
park.
it on it.
And we're coming back heading
Well,
home.
he calls back and
And
he says he
across the
wants a
street,
video.
suddenly,
My
3
cousin
deer
comes in, he
jumped
takes a video.
over a fence and
He writes
headed
back, he calls back later and says, it's not clear enough. He
And
says,
they were
"Your station
probably-
in Great Falls."
like from here to the camera.
It's not
So
KRTV.
not- but
She
no,
calls
they-
KRTV, they jump for it. I think it's 15 minutes.
So they were very
Record us
close.
playing and then
But after they jumped over the fence across the
ship it
street,
off to David Letterman
they
show
were
and a couple
walking
weeks
slowly.
later.
And one of them was
air
really,
part of it on
I think it
the
was the male
TV
that
show.
had Alice.
Pavarotti sang.
And
And Letterman says, I'm a little bit music. Oh yeah, playing that
and we
video
were
you
just
play
standing
on the
still,
fiddle.
and my dog was being good.
It shows me singing Camptown Lady, singing this song, and you got it, and it was English. This went on over and over and over again.
Looked over toward us.
Finally, after 9 years of this,
And she,
I'm called to go to New York City to be on the letter.
I would,
Several times, once I
she
sang.
was making me run faster than I
And
could,
that, I'll
And I
forget
could just
those, what
see
I
the-
was.
you know,
Letterman
blood
says to
on my
me,
face
you're from
when I saw
Montana.
her getting maybe.
He says, how many people are in Montana?
And so I just yelled
I
at
said,
the
over
public,
900 and some
stop.
thousand. Well, does that
And
mean
I had all the power of anguish
He
and
says,
fear.
is that what the
Everything
mountains
in
are?"
that
I said,
one
"No."
word.
He said, what mountains in Montana? I said, "God."
And
He said, are there
there's
any
at that
4-lane
point,
freeways in Montana?
when she was barking,
I said,
And
well,
so
there's
she
one
stopped.
running across the street from east to
And she
west,
stopped
and the interstate running from
and for
north to
some
south.
reason.
I didn't know it then,
that
but he had
sort
a
of
collection of
whatever
race
was
cars.
on
You had
her,
to go to Germany, where
And
you
they
go 180
turned back
miles an
around
hour
and
on
jumped
an
back
autobahn.
over the fence. and
He says,
just
what's the
went
speed
like
limit in
this.
Montana? I said, well, it's reasonable and prudent.
I was
He thought that was the
so,
funniest thing he ever heard. He said, oh,
so
there's no food,
scared
there's no
at
America.
that point that either she would get her idea.
Okay, time.
I would.
Time to switch.
Okay.
This is really hard. I
Anyway,
mean,
he, I because I told him
I'd appreciate anything you do.
that he's reasonable and prudent. Bought this place up at-
Okay, okay.
I adopted a dog.
And
And
shortly after that, they enacted the 75 mile
a dog that you, a sledding dog,
Okay,
Eskimo.
so we go back?
Go ahead.
All right, so for 40 years I've heard the same thing. I look just like Dave Letterman. And they would tell me all the time, I didn't know who he was. And they said it was this guy on TV, so I watched it on TV, and I thought he was rude and arrogant. I didn't really care for him. And so I didn't think much of it. And this went on for years and years, and people would tell me, and I didn't really care about him so much. And then it got to the point where it's hard to parse it all together. To the point where they got in touch with my ex-wife, and they got in touch with me and said, Dave Letterman, I'd like to talk with you to see. And do you have a CBS station in Montana? I said, well, we don't know. And KRTV got in touch with it, and they thought it was their 15 minutes fame to talk with David Letterman and me about this, so they jumped on it. And so they had me come out to New York and talk to David Letterman. And that was one of the greatest things of my life at that time, I would say. And so they had David Letterman on there, and they had Pavarotti, and he did something, and David Letterman said, I'm somewhat of a musician myself. And they showed the clip of me playing Camptown Ladies, and thought that was hilarious. And they asked me, so how many people are in Montana? And he said, and I says, oh, less than 1 million. And he says, oh, less than 1 million, okay. And he says, do they have a speed limit there in Montana? And he says, it's reasonable for prudent. And he thought that was hilarious. He said there wasn't a numerical speed limit in Montana. He thought that was hilarious, and that's the reason why he bought the property there in Choteau, and because he knew that the speed limit wasn't numerical, and that's the story. So, I missed a few in the middle there.
You have a better memory than I do.
That was tough. That was tough. And Dave Letterman is one of my, I've spent more time watching him and listening to him.
I used to like him when I met him.
Yeah,
But when I
absolutely.
first saw him, I thought
Yeah, he's got that about him, yeah.
All right, are we ready to wrap it up?
This is not what I should be doing. Let's go back where it's safe.
I tried to interview him once, but I couldn't get in touch with his people.
That is very
So I
interesting.
talked to
Hard-
Governor
hard to
Schweitzer
do.
instead, because he'd been on the show.
I'm so curious.
Everybody else is doing.
I've got a bunch of questions, but the first one I'm just came to me. It has nothing to do with the workshop. How many of y'all knew each other when you walked into the room?
I think I knew you.
No, oh, the
I know
library.
Sarah.
I recognize Richard. Yeah.
And then these two over here,
Yeah.
and then him, but he just walked in.
I had a hunch, you know, when you
Yeah.
have that hunch that you know someone.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Now you know each other, for real.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, from the storyteller pilot perspective, you know, what was that like to have somebody tell your story back to you in the first person?
I'll share.
Yeah, go ahead,
Because it
Alice.
was amazing. It
Okay.
was totally amazing. And she did a really good job, obviously not word for word.
Sure.
But, you know, she caught the whole arc of the story, but she added something I didn't say. This was a true story about something that happened with my dog. And it just opened up that whole experience to me. That something that I said affected another party in the story. And I never thought of that before. So it was actually a gift to me. I mean, it was a gift just to hear the story told so well, because I was scared I was going to be the co-pilot. I wasn't sure I could do a very good job doing that. So it
It is
was,
harder than you think, like you said.
yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thing. Like
You were the storyteller?
I was a storyteller, and I was describing dog poop that was coming down the stairs. And I described it as cascading, and she called it a waterfall. And it created it was the same visual, just like a noun and a verb, or a noun and an adjective, I guess. But
Yeah.
And I was surprised how good his memory was. I was talking real fast.
You were.
Trying to get it all out
Yeah.
in 3 minutes, which I didn't quite do. But
You did
I was
pretty good.
amazed how much he could remember it as fast as I was talking.
Yeah. Co-pilots, you want to talk about your experience?
So hard, immediate brain fart.
Yeah.
I got it,
yes,
but it took a minute, but it was hard, you know, the whole active listening aspect of it. But then, you know, I'm still technically at work, so I'm also thinking about work. And, you know, that's just the same thing for life as well, but active listening to the point where you can get there and repeat something back as verbatim as possible is quite difficult.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, but it was also fun.
Yeah.
To go down that road.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. Yeah. The first time I ever did a storytelling public performance wasn't quite like that, but I was pushing myself and believed that I didn't have any stories worth sharing. But I wanted to try it out. And so I told this, and you'll love this, Sarah. I told the story of how my parents met in the first person as if I was my father. And my dad's job, he worked at the Akron Public Library in Akron, Ohio, and his job was to collect the books from the front desk and take them downstairs, sort the books, and reshelve them. And my mom was the one who worked at the front counter. Cute little short Italian Catholic girl. And my dad's super shy. And so he thought that he would get her phone number by looking it up in the phone book. Instead of asking her for her number. And so, you know, he's talking to her for days and he never remembers to ask for her name, and then he finally asked for her name. My mom's name is Becky. And so she tells him that it's Cleo. And he's like, great. And he goes down back to the basement in the library, and then he's like, forgot to get her last name. So back up the steps he trundles, and he asks her for her last name. She doesn't say Cleopatra. She just says Patra, and her last name is Patra. goes back down to the basement and opens up the phone book and he's like, so dumb. You know, and then I walk through the first date and he gives his person who became my uncle, who's 13 at the time, gives him his brand new 1968 Cougar keys. Get out of here. And he drives around the block and so he could sit on the porch with my mom, you know, and on a glider. So I did that in the first person and I sent him the recording and he goes, you were close. You got most of the details close. I missed apparently the, no credit cards at the time, right? So he took her to a steakhouse and said, get whatever you want. She gets the filet, of course. And he's like counting his money under the table and he orders a baked potato. Like that's what he had money for. Anyway, the pilot co-pilot camp, I think it's pretty fun. And we are here till 7:30, and so I'm curious if you want to flip that script and have the person who started out as the co-pilot be the pilot, tell your own story.
Let's do it.
We got time.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
All right, let's do it.
Me too.
Okay, well, I gotta think about the story.
No, I'm going with her.
All right.
Oh, this is gonna be so hard. Yeah, now I have to think of a story then.
I believe it, yeah. Right, Okay, so.
Are you ready?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you my Michael Jordan story. You know the basketball player. Okay, so I grew up in the 90s and I was a big Chicago Bulls fan, Michael Jordan fan. And I had his poster on the wall and I had his jersey and I rooted for him. And he was always a big my favorite basketball player. Well, I became a journalist and I had an internship at the Reno Gazette-Journal in Reno, Nevada. And one of the events was the celebrity golf tournament in Lake Tahoe. And I was told there was a bunch of football players and celebrities and John Elway and Dan Marino and all these famous people were there. And I was told Michael Jordan would be there golfing. He was a big golf fan. He says, oh wow, my childhood idol is going to be there. And he says, he's not going to talk to you, he doesn't talk to reporters. He'll talk to the Golf Channel, but he's not going to talk to us. He said one of the other reporters who had been covering it for years and years and years. But I thought, this is my one chance I'm going to maybe ever get to see the guy. I'm going to go up and talk to him. I'm going to just try, just go up and say, Mr. Jordan, can I ask you a few questions? So I was scared. So I started following him around the golf course, probably 4, 5, 6 holes. And finally got up the courage, went up to him, and I says, Mr. Jordan. And I put up my hand, he shook my hand. His hand, like in golf, it was like probably three times the size of my hand. Like it just like buried my hand. I just remember like I've never shook anyone's hand that big. And then he says, how you doing? And he says, I'm with the Reno Gazette-Journal. I'd like to ask you a few questions. And he says, no questions. And then he pushed me off. And he says, get out of here. And then his 2 goons came on me and says, get out of here. And I was upset at that point. It's like, why? What? He says, he doesn't want to talk. It's like, why doesn't he want to talk? And he says, just get out of here. So I was like, so I was like, fine, whatever. And for the longest time, I was like, oh, well, I'm Michael Jordan, he's not so. But I've since kind of got a little less disappointed about it because, he didn't know who I was. I could have been just from the National Enquirer making up lies about him. And he's, I understand his side, but at that point, I was there, I was bummed because I met my hero and he didn't want to talk to me, so.
Are we supposed to wait for times up?
I think so, yeah, we're supposed to wait until. Right. It's all good.
No, I'll remember.
Right. Yeah, it can be, it's tough to, but yeah, like Jordan.
So what's your job in the library?
I'm the communications coordinator.
Oh,
Yeah, I do all the PR.
You got it. You got it. You got it.
That one's really hard.
It is hard, isn't
I
it?
mean, part of it is,
Time.
part of it is,
Okay.
Well, I grew up a Michael Jordan fan. I was a Chicago Bulls fan. I had Michael Jordan's picture on the wall in my basement, and I had
because you have to remember it, not just listen.
memorabilia about the Chicago Bulls on my bedroom, and I grew up a Michael
I like to listen
Jordan
to
fan.
college courses.
Hope that someday I'd be able to meet Michael Jordan when I
And it was
had a chance.
called,
Well, I finished college and I became a journalist, and I was writing for a newspaper in Reno, Nevada.
on communication.
And I heard that there was going to be a golf tournament which
And there are like 6.
involved a lot of celebrities,
In your brain. Wow, you are listening.
stars of baseball, basketball, and football. And I heard Michael Jordan's going to be
And
there.
then you have a pen.
So I decided I'm going to go try to meet Michael Jordan and ask him a few questions and interview him for my newspaper. Now, I was told beforehand that Michael Jordan didn't like to talk to reporters. He was willing to talk to the Golf Channel news people, but not to reporters from the local business. But I thought, why not? I'll give it a try. So I said, he's been my childhood
It's
friend.
amazing we understand each other.
So I approached Michael Jordan on the golf course, and I said, Michael,
Your brain is connecting.
I'm from the Reno newspaper here, and I just love to ask you just a few questions, if you don't mind. He told me, no, I don't respond to reporters. No, I'm not interested in talking to reporters. He said, well, please, Mr. Jordan, I'll just ask a few simple questions. I won't take much of your time. Well, two of his goons, as you call them, approached me and they told me, now get away from him. He's not interested in talking to the press. You can't talk. I said, but why not? I'm not going to write anything discouraging or disparaging about it. Just a few questions. He said, no, you get away from here. Get away from here. Well, I was totally discouraged and I was totally disillusioned. I felt just terrible about that for a long time. I thought I met my life's sports hero and he wouldn't even answer a few simple questions. But later on I realized he had a reason for it. Didn't know if I was from the National Enquirer wanting to spread rumors about him, or he didn't want to take chances. So it's his prerogative. He wouldn't discuss any questions I had with him. So I got over it after a while. I got over my despair. And I still admire Michael Jordan.
All right, that was really good.
Well, you talk slower than I do.
I do, yeah.
You talk slower than I do.
Yeah, that was pretty much exactly it. Yeah, nice work.
Excellent.
How'd it go?
Really well.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Which was easier, the storytelling or the?
I thought the listening was going to be really, really hard,
Yeah.
but it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. More than I thought it would. You did great.
I mean, this is my job and I hate being the listener.
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. And I should be. I've been practicing for 13 years, you think. But I constantly interrupt people and ask my wife to tell you. Any other things you want to share about what that experience was like?
I think it made it easier for me to remember because as she was telling the story, I remembered kind of a similar experience that I had had that was similar to what she was talking about, and so that helped me to at least visualize it a little more and keep some of those details like more in the front of my mind.
Yeah.
I had the same experience. And we were just talking about that. Yeah.
Our brains are doing a lot of things while we're listening. We are constantly trying to relate to that idea with our own experience. And if we can't experience that,
Right.
we have a hard time understanding. If you talk about engineering, I don't get it. You know what I mean? I can't hear you. But anyway, yeah, our minds are evaluating what we're hearing, we're judging on our own moral ethics here, on what you're saying, and trying to understand what it is and what you're trying to say at the same time. We're
And-
amazing creatures.
And remember it. And
And
say it
remember
back.
it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And it's amazing, we hear each other at all.
Yeah.
Because all this is going on in our own head while you're trying to tell us something.
Kathy, you're great. Because you're leading me down a path. Are you a plant? Anybody else?
So I thought it was wild that, so Rich told me about how he's been told for 40 years that he looks like Mr. David Letterman.
I could see that. Mhm.
And of all the things he could have told me, that's interesting because I've tried unsuccessfully to get in touch with and interview Mr. Letterman.
No, now you have an in.
I guess, I don't know, but just because, yeah, he's always been really a hero of mine, and he's hilarious, and I'm kind of it's hard to admit, but like I go on YouTube and just watch old Letterman shows from like the 80s and 90s. Just
The
like,
Velcro wall is classic.
yeah, it is, yeah, and yeah, and I've had weird experiences where like one day, this was last year, I was doing a freelance project, and I was looking up this museum in New York City. I was looking up what art they had, and then the same day Dave Letterman he does a YouTube channel thing where he talks about, and he was talking about that exact museum that I was just looking up that same day, and I was just like, Jesus,
Great minds think
yeah,
alike.
I guess.
So
So
cool.
yeah, so when Rich talking about that, I was just like, all right, yeah. I felt a little strange. I was going to say I saw him as obnoxious, but but you said once you met him, he was a nicer guy
Nicer guy.
than when he first
Yeah,
appeared.
he was so witty.
Yeah, yeah,
Anything somebody'd say, he'd have an immediate comeback based upon somebody else's words earlier.
right.
He's just the wittiest
Yeah,
thing I've
yes,
seen.
it is. Yeah.
So you were talking about, all the different things that our brains are doing when we're listening. One of the things that our brains are doing when we're listening collectively to one person talking is that our brains in the whole room are syncing up. And it's scientifically shown. If you want, I can email you the link to the study. But as we're listening to someone describe a scene in a story, our brains are acting as if we are there. And everyone's brain in the room is synced up together. It's wild. So think about this. So I was playing soccer last week, and I watched a kid punch another kid. Or last week I was playing soccer and I could hear the lawnmowers shutting off, and I was worried because the sprinklers had just shut off too, and the grass was wet, and the sun was going down, and I could smell the lilacs, and the ice cream truck was going by, and I saw this kid get up out of the sandbox and punch another kid. See the difference? Engaging the five senses,
Mm-hmm.
even if you've never played soccer.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about, I talk about engineering, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you've never played soccer, but you've smelled fresh cut grass.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know what the lilacs smell like right now, especially,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've heard an ice cream truck before. So when you're talking about anything in your story, in a scene, you can engage the five senses to try to bring the listener along with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty cool trick to do. Instead of saying I ate lunch, I walked into the kitchen and I could smell the grilled cheese. See the difference? And the coffee smelled maybe like it was burnt. Oh. That's a whole different situation than I walked into the kitchen to get myself a sandwich. Right? So engaging the sense of taste, because right now I'm like, my mouth is watering for cheese. I don't know if anybody else is. The sense of smell. You could also talk about the way that the silverware was clinking in the sink when you knocked over the pan and the water spilled, and you could hear the water hitting the floor. So a whole different situation than I walked in and had some lunch, right? So engaging the five senses when you can. The sense of touch. His skin felt like sandpaper, and I knew that he worked with his hands when I shook his hand. different than he had a strong grip, or he seemed trustworthy. Think about ways that you can be tactile the way you're describing somebody or something or an event. And you can even do that metaphorically if you wanted to. Her smile reminded me of lilacs. In the fall when they're dead.
There you go.
You can also use humor. And sometimes the humor is, you can use it to lighten a pretty heavy story too. And sometimes if you're actually performing, you'll be surprised at what the audience thinks is funny. And so if you've got like a 10-minute story, you got to also remember that they're going to be interacting with you in some way. It's not heckling necessarily, right? But you have to give them space for that and account for that when you're thinking about how long your story can be. And sometimes it's, you're doing it over dinner. And I'm trying to give you tools that you can use to start practicing your own storytelling. And if you wanted to pull this out at a dinner party, it would be pretty fun, to get the rest of the crew involved and have them do some of these same activities. But we tell stories all the time, all day long. Officer, I'm real sorry. I know I was going a little fast.
Or as I run the red light, I'm running through. Okay, I know, officer, but whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the last time I got pulled over, and I'll admit some privilege, but I was, here's the car, the curb, right? And somebody's parallel parking. So I go around them without putting my turn signal on.
Oh.
And I see in my rearview mirror the officer's eyes lock into mine, and I'm like, oh, I'm so screwed.
Yeah.
And the reason I was rushing is because I was late to a performance that I was hosting. And I had forgotten a piece of equipment, so I had to go home and get it. And I had gotten it, and I was on my way to park the car, and I watched her, and I just knew I was screwed. And so as soon as we crossed the cross street, I pulled over. Her lights came on, and I pulled over. And my dad was a cop. You might have heard me imply that with the handcuff piece. So he taught me how to get pulled over. And the way you do it is you keep your hands visible at all times, and never admit guilt. And ask permission for everything. So she pulls up. My window is not down. She's like, roll your window down. And I go like this. And she goes, you know why I pulled you over? And I go, no. She goes, you didn't use your turn signal back there. And I was like, oh, really? I'm so sorry. Can I see your license registration? And I'm like, I'm going to take my hands off the wheel and go into the glove box and get my things. And I'm going to reach into my pocket where my wallet is. Is that okay? I'm asking permission. Get all the things, give it to her. And I also am like, and so I say, I'm not asking you for any favors. Like, if you're going to give me a ticket, please just do so. But do it expediently because I'm late. And she turns around and she goes, don't tell me how to do my job.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. So she walks away. And I'm watching her in the mirror. And she doesn't have her ticket book when she walks back. And I've got my logo for the organization emblazoned on the side of the rig. And she goes, I know who you are, and I know what you're doing, and I love your show. And like, get out of here.
Very good.
So then, months later, Yellowstone is shooting at the Union Club bar in Missoula. And so they gutted the bar, and they redid it and made it look the way they wanted it to. But before they did, I know some of the bartenders there, they like measured everything and like wrote down exactly how all the different photos were hanging and like put it back together exactly the way it used to be. But I'm walking past, I didn't know they were filming, and I was walking down to get a drink. And she's standing outside, she's standing out front. And I go, I'm pretty sure you pulled me over in March. And she goes, oh, I did. I said, you know, I'm doing another show in a couple months. Do you want a pair of tickets to the show? You know, I don't know what the policy is for accepting gifts or not, but sure, I'll take a pair of tickets. She says, I said, I don't have anything to write with. You know, put your email address in my phone, and the tickets are digital, and I'll send them to you. And I'm thinking she's going to tell me to get bent, and she puts it in there, and I'm like, okay. And so then I run into her, you know, after the show, and she's like, that was really fun, thanks, you know. So I'm telling you that story for a lot of different reasons. One of them was to talk about cadence. I don't know if you noticed the way I was telling the story, and my use of pauses. And I was also using my body language a lot. You know, overly animated, exaggerated. So when you're performing a story, you can engage your listener with body language and the use of pauses and speeding up your voice when it's starting to get really intense, and then slowing it down when you want people to pay attention. You can also moderate the volume of your voice and talk a little softer when something important is about to happen. And the most common thing that people struggle with when they're trying to perform a story is filler words. The most common, I edit audio a lot, and so I hear it all the time. It's and. I thought it was just going to be when I started the process. It's and almost always. I learned the way to get rid of your filler words is first to identify them. And filler words have a job to do. Has a very important job. So does like, so does ah. They all are doing work. And the work that they're doing is they're allowing your mouth to catch up to your brain. Because you can't speak as fast as you think. Maybe Richard can. So, I had a job. I was a salesperson, and before I left the office for my first sale, my boss made me get out one of these cameras. You know, before we walked around with cameras in our pockets all the time, I had to get, and it looked very similar to that one, and put it on a tripod and record the sales pitch. And then he made me put it up on a big TV, and he was the intended client, right? He played that role and gave me nothing. He just poker faced the entire time. Didn't ask any questions, didn't seem excited, just. And so we put it up on the screen, and he goes, just observe and tell me what you observe. And I would make some statement of fact, and then some encouraging entreaty to him, and not get what I expected in return, and then say kind of. And I learned that my filler phrase was kind of. 32 kind ofs in 3 minutes. Yeah, I know. And he said, that's okay. Now you've identified the challenge. And he was careful not to use words like problem. And I can solve it for you. And so that he taught me another thing is like, if you're going to point out a challenge that somebody is having, also give them a solution for it. Not just say, you know, you say a lot, or I notice you slouch. This is how good posture works, you know, you can show them. This is what you do instead of saying, be quiet.
It's like replacing a bad habit with a good habit.
Yep, pausing will serve the same purpose as a filler word. And what it does for the listener is it gives them time to process and catch up, but also they do this because they know whatever it is you're about to say is probably really important because you paused. It's super effective. And I've been trying to practice that all night. I don't know if you've noticed. So the instruction I'm giving is also modeling the behavior that I'm hoping to impart to you if you ever decide you want to perform, and even if you're doing it, you know, at a dinner party. It's like, oh my gosh, Alice and Kathy, I want them at my dinner party. They know how to tell stories. You know, so those are the things that I know in this short amount of time that we have. Curious if you have any questions for
Can one go to your website to get tickets for upcoming shows?
One can go to my website to get tickets for upcoming shows if one is going to be in Missoula. Those are, right now, that's where all the shows are. We are trying to put systems in place to allow for expansion again, but I'm the only staff person. So since we became a nonprofit, I've gotten more responsibilities, and we haven't gotten back to Helena or Butte, or I want to come here, I want to do one in Bozeman, you know. My dream is to do one in Tippett Rise, that would be amazing. But yes, one can go to the website, tellussomething.org, to get tickets for an event if you're coming to Missoula. The next one is June 11th. It's as part of, in partnership with Missoula Pride. So we're going to feature LGBTQ voices as much as we can. And if you aren't coming to Missoula, but you want to hear some pretty awesome stories, you can stream all of them at the website, or we have a podcast you can subscribe to. Or if YouTube's more your jam, we have a YouTube channel you can watch. Most of the stories, I've noticed there are some that are missing that I haven't uploaded, so I have to find them, the recordings, and upload those. But you can, we've had storytellers as young as 12 and as old as 85. And, you know, all different colors, races, ethnicities, political, religious backgrounds. One of my favorites, my buddy Jason, he's my friend now, but I didn't know him when he told the story. He's about 7 feet tall and he's black, and he's originally from Florida. And he has a hypothesis that you can't be curious and angry at the same time. And this was in 2016. And so he thinks, you know, Trump's coming to Missoula, I'm going to go check it out. I totally disagree with everything this guy stands for, but I'm going to go see why people are excited about this guy. So he gets tickets to go to the rally. And he's standing in the line with some people from the Bitterroot Valley, who, if you don't know the Bitterroot Valley, they're known to be very right-wing. And they've got their MAGA hats on, and he asks them, you know, about the hats. And why do you love this guy so much? And they're having a human conversation. And he's not judging, he's not criticizing, he's just listening. And they're like softening up and saying, you know, we don't generally wear these hats much because we're afraid of what people are going to say to us, or we might get violence directed at us. This is 10 minutes, right? Now we're towards the end, and he says, huh, you can take your hat off at the end of the day. Right.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh. And the whole room, you could hear the whole room go, oh. Right, so like we have stories like that. We have a guy who, everyone here knows what a crown is. Yeah. So he's getting fitted for a crown. And before they put the cement on, you know, they dry fit it, and then they pull it off and make whatever adjustments they have to, dry fit it again. And she's struggling to pull it off, and she does, and it like pinballs around his mouth, and then it's gone. And he's like, do you have it? She's like, no, do you have it? No, I don't have it. Did you swallow it? I don't know. He's like, trying to get it, cough it up. He goes to the ER, he goes to the ear and nose and throat doctor. He usually lives back and forth across town, this whole long routine, gets x-rays. And while they're doing the x-rays, one of the x-ray techs is like, wait a minute, let's take another picture in a different way. And so they take another picture of his face and find that his tooth is embedded in his sinus cavity.
Oh my God.
Because he sucked it up in through his nose.
Yeah.
And so,
Building of nightmares.
so then they have to use these special like pointy pliers to try to get it out. And he does end up swallowing it in the end, and now he has to dig through his poop for a week to retrieve it. Because it's, you know, it's a $2,000 piece of equipment.
I'm so glad I got my crown on 2 days ago. And I wasn't going to do it tomorrow. Yeah.
But I mean, the point I'm making is that sometimes the stories are really funny, And sometimes they're really poignant, and sometimes they're really, really hard to listen to because they're so traumatic. And so what I've learned is I try to make sure that they're not all just one of those things. And so throughout the night, you'll see the energy kind of do that.
So you're familiar with Garrison Keillor's storytelling?
Prairie Home Companion, yeah.
And yeah, I just love his storytelling.
Yeah.
But I've never heard him tell a story in the first person. It's
No.
always about somebody else.
Yep.
So I still don't understand why this emphasis of telling stories about yourself that are true is going on. You know, when the best storytellers, Mark Twain, Garrison Keillor, people like that, never told first-person stories.
There's a room for all of it.
Yeah, but you go to a story slam and they won't let you on stage unless you have a story in the
If you
first
go to the
person.
storytelling
That's true.
convention, they do. If you go to the National Storytelling Convention, they absolutely do. They have.
Oh, they do?
Oh yeah, they have people who only tell yarns, people who only
Oh,
tell
that's.
only tell stories that are done in
Where
song.
is that?
I don't know where they. I think they do it at a different place every year. Last time I think it was in Iowa.
Oh, I'd love to go to that.
Yeah, you can look it up. National Storytelling Festival. Yep. So yeah, so you can watch all the stories on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to the podcast if you want. The free writing that we did, the instructions are on the table here if you want to take that with you. And there's also the worksheet of the five, I call it the 5 beats of a story. So the story structure has those 5 parts that I described. And then there are some printed tickets that didn't sell from past events that are great for bookmarks. And I'm just trying to get rid of them, so if you want them, take them. Sarah, you can throw them upstairs if you want during the book sale.
Yeah.
How long is that book sale going on?
It'll be open tomorrow
Boom.
from 10 to 5, and then, so tomorrow's another half price book sale day, and then on Saturday from 10 to 5 is the sack sale, so you can come in and fill up a bag for $10.
Awesome. Had I known, I would have brought way more
$5
bookmarks.
or
Okay, bag for $5 for 10. Thank you.
Oh my
Mark,
gosh,
so
thank
much
you,
for
guys.
coming. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't have done it if you always said, I'm not doing that. So
No,
thanks for being willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming out. This was a Humanities Montana program, so we also have to thank Humanities Montana
Yes.
for sponsoring it. Thank you guys for being here and for being willing to open up and be maybe a little vulnerable in this space. The library is a safe space for everyone, so we are happy to be here and be able to do that. And although I don't have a space for you here for 300 people, we do have a space for 120. So.
We generally, the first time we do a show in a new town, it's pretty small.
Yeah.
The first show we ever did was 75 people.
Oh.
And what was fascinating about that show, and I know we're at time, so if anybody doesn't want to listen to me talk one more time, one more story, you can leave. But the very first time we did it, so a little bit of history about Tell Us Something is when I told you about that story the first time I ever did it. Well, that time, I wasn't running the show. Somebody else was, and he didn't have any real structure. He wasn't vetting the tellers. There was no workshop. There was no theme. There was no time limit. So it could be like 12 people telling 20-minute stories, and sometimes it was amazing. Like, I have this cute puppy, and I'm native, and we're poor, and all of a sudden I'm eating my puppy. No one told me that's what was happening. Or I killed a girl, she ran out in front of my car, and now I'm best friends with her mom. Or I went to Amsterdam, and it was awesome, but I have no story arc or details as to why it was awesome, but I'm going to repeat the phrase, it was awesome, for 20 minutes. Like, it was terrible.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So that was called, he was calling it Missoula Moth, and he was using that name without permission from, if you don't know, there's an organization in New York City called The Moth. And they, on National Public Radio, the Moth Radio Hour, Sunday nights here on Montana Public Radio. And he was using, he like jammed the words together with no space. He was like, they won't notice. So he did 5 of those events. I performed at 4 of them. First one was the story of my parents' meeting. The second one was quitting a job. The third one, this is not a place to tell you what it was about. It was in a bar. So he leaves town, he moves to Bozeman, and the Missoula Art Museum at the time was doing this thing they called Artini, where you could come get a cocktail and walk around and talk and look at art. And it was like cocktail hour, and they would often have then some sort of presentation or performance. And they said, hey, come do the Missoula Moth at Artini. And he was like, Mark seems to really enjoy this. I'm out of here. I don't live in your town anymore. So you should get Mark. And I knew that I didn't want to just do a one-off. I wanted to build something, and this is in 2011. But I also didn't want to build something and then have to change the name down the road. So I linked to themoth.org on the MissoulaMoth.com website, and within a couple days, Joan Firestone, the then executive director of the Moth, called me and was like, what are you doing? And I told her, send me a cease and desist letter, and so she did. And we changed the name at the very first event that I hosted into what it is now. But what was fascinating for me as an observer, sort of looking back on it even now, it's fascinating, is I wasn't the only person doing a performance. There was a really amazing art exhibit. Some people might know Peter Rutledge Koch. Peter Koch is the best printmaker in the world. And he sells like $20,000 books. Like one edition, he'll make this book, and it's like crazy. He's so good at it. And he did broadsides of Deborah Magpie Erling's manuscript, sections of the manuscript for the Journals of Sacagawea. So she had been working on that book since 2011, and it just came out, I think, last year. So she read from her manuscript first. Deborah Magpie Erling opened for me.
Wow.
But, you know, she didn't know that, and I wasn't really the headliner. It worked out that way. And it was fascinating. What's fascinating about that setup was the difference between a read story and a told story. It is so different. Like, it could be a totally true story, and, you know, reading it out of a book is way different than telling it. And so if you're thinking about performing, I encourage you to not write it out, at least not at first. Most of us have one of these. There's often a voice recording app in it. Record your first draft, saying it out loud. And then if you want to go back and write it out or take notes and bullet points, that's a different thing. But first draft, always just tell it out loud. And most folks don't write the way they speak. So, like, her voice was mellifluous. Nobody says that, but I would write that. You know? And mellifluous, if you don't know, is a great word. It means flows like honey. It's a great word.
It's a great word.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So I would use that word in a conversation, but most people wouldn't, you know. And so, yeah, I'm a fan of writing, and I sometimes will do it. But when you're trying to work on a story that you're going to perform, don't start with the pen. Thank you so much. I know we're past time. I'm really appreciative of you.